I'm here today with NDP leader candidate Yves Engler. He has been on the left for a long time. I actually know him and I wanted to talk to him because I've seen him in person. You came to Kingston for, I believe it was a Fight for 15 event a long time ago. Also in university, I came across your books and articles quite a few times, Trent University. I don't have the book with me today, which I'm sad to see I don't have, but I did read your book, Canada in Haiti. I found that very illuminating. Yves is well known on the left. Now he's running to be the head honcho of the NDP. So, what is your agenda and what are you going to do different?
Well, I think one of the slogans was "We'll do everything different," and the I'm running on a anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, pro decolonization, degrowth, economic democracy platform. So it's a big picture structural change, and um, and we want the party to be more activist oriented. That it has a presence in all the Palestine anti-genocide demonstrations, that it has a presence in this upcoming Draw the Line protests, that it's a place for members to discuss capitalism, to think about the big political issues of the day, be that the drastic overconsumption that our whole capitalist society is engenders, be that Canadian foreign policy that advances the interests of empire and corporate interests. So I would say there's a lot that we're proposing that's different from what Jagmeet Singh did, both in terms of the policy proposals, but also in terms of how we see the party as engaged with social movements and with basically challenging power and mobilizing the population to abolish billionaires and the like.
Okay, so why don't we start on that? Abolishing billionaires. What, how can we do that? And what exactly do you see as the benefit? Will that get us closer to socialism?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we have to go beyond abolishing billionaires to go towards socialism. I'd say we have to, the notion of people having $100 million is contrary to my ethical code. It makes a mockery of valuing work, and it makes a mockery of quite frankly of democracy, because of course when there's people who have billions and hundreds of millions, they dominate the economic world, and that has all kinds of spillover in terms of dominating politics, dominating media, etc. Now, how we can abolish billionaires is there's different ways of doing it. Obviously, wealth taxes is the most straightforward. You can have a wealth tax at anything over a billion, and 90% or 100% goes to the government. That but I think that we have to big picture in terms of abolishing billionaires is we have to expropriate. That's not a popular discussion, or it's not a widely held discussion. Maybe it is actually is more popular than we realize. But we're putting forward economic democracy, and basically what economic democracy means, instead of $1 one vote capitalist system, it's one person one vote. And so where there is social labor, there should be community ownership, and there should be workplace democracy. So that means that what are, now, if you're a wealthy capitalist that is in control of a firm that has, 10,000 employees, well, that firm should have internal democracy where the workforce gets to vote on conditions on, who the managers are and the like. But it also should be under some form of community control, whether that's at the municipal level, whether that's at the provincial level, federal level, or potentially in some firms going down the road, even at the global level. But yeah, the basic notion is that we want to extend democracy beyond the political sphere. We want to expand it to the economic sphere. And obviously, this is in stages. But I think that the notion of abolishing billionaires, most people understand that it's absolutely not it's unjust to have a system where people have so much and others have so little.
So I'm hearing influences here from possibly Richard Wolff. Are you a follower of his, and maybe Thomas Piketty with his abolishing billionaires idea?
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with both of them. I don't I know that Richard Wolff does lots of podcasts and stuff. I haven't actually listened to many of those. My uncle 20 years ago wrote a book called Economic Democracy, uh,
Ah,
the working class alternative to capitalism.
who's your
So
uncle?
Al Engler, he just passed a year ago. But so these are not these are ideas. My father's written on the subject as well. So these aren't. I think that these are uh, elements of this are long-standing aspects of socialist thought going back, a century or more. But in the here and now, I think that abolishing billionaires and Piketty's arguments there, and the argument. I mean, I didn't read his. I guess it was called Capital.
Yeah.
And I didn't read. I read many reviews of it. But the notion that it concentrates wealth, the capitalism concentrates wealth, I think is quite clear cut. If there aren't major interventions in the economic political sphere to lessen the inequality that capitalism engenders, that's what happens. And we have a situation. I know the Thompson family is the wealthiest family in Canada, right? And I sort of knew that. I knew they were billionaires. I knew they thought they were, okay, 20 billion or something like that. They were very wealthy. But I went and looked at it just a couple of days ago, and the Thompson family actually has nearly $100 billion. I mean, $100 billion. That is absolutely obscene. And obviously, that's just obscene in and of itself. Morally, I think that they could not have worked so hard to, amass such wealth, right? So it's a demeaning of the value of labor by, a family having that amount of resources. But then, of course, it has all kinds of spillover effects on the political sphere, and obviously as the owners of Thomson Reuters, and I don't think they own all of Globe and Mail still, but they historically have owned most of the Globe and Mail, and I believe still own a share of the Globe and Mail. And that has an impact on the most important newspaper in the country. And so I'm not familiar with all of the different causes they fund and whatnot, but they obviously have all kinds of political impact, much beyond a family of 20 should have. The average family of 20 that's working, regular working class jobs obviously doesn't have that kind of influence. So we have to confront that, and I think there's a lot of support for the notion that whether that's introducing legislation that says that in the federal sphere you can only have a wage gap of 10 times within a firm, right? So you have the flight attendants at Air Canada, the mostly female force. They're fighting for to get around $50,000 a year, while the CEO is making over 12 million a year. Well, I would introduce legislation that said, immediately that said no more than a 10 times gap. So either you increase the flight attendant's salary up to I think it would be 1.2 million, or you reduce the CEO's salary to 500,000. So there's all kinds of different measures like that go in the direction of economic democracy, or at least of mitigating the most undemocratic obscene elements of 21st century capitalism.
Your program sounds like this very strong kind of reformist program with the eye towards building socialism in the long term. And you mentioned imposing heavy taxes and rules about wages. That's a bit different than the kind of classical Marxist perspective, which wouldn't even call for something like a minimum wage because they would expect that actually it would be the working class in its own power strong enough that they would kind of be able to enforce their own minimum wage. They would see it as an imposition from the state to try to build, and try to be nice to them or try to make laws that tell capitalists what to do. The idea would be that the strength of the working class itself would be the thing that brings them to heel. Yeah, to what degree is this going to be your idea for socialism, a top-down thing, or how much do we need organic strength from below to make this work?
There's no success without organic strength from below, and I mean, part of the model is to obviously we have to empower working people to run the firms where they're working and to have the consciousness around running the firms where they're working, and the know-how and all that generally we minimize that. In our current model, we act like the managers and the capitalists have all the knowledge and working people are, dumb or whatever. But so we do, but there is, knowledge transfer and knowledge consciousness raising and empowerment that is necessary. Um, so the in terms of the top down, I mean, I don't think that it's not an either or. And I would say even at the level of this campaign, I mean, one of the things that's a problem to developing economic democracy in Canada is that we're not talking about that in working class organizations, or only way at the fringes, right? A small little left kind of groupings. There isn't a discussion within the major unions of these questions, and I think that this campaign helps develop some space for that, even within mainstream unions, or potentially the more success this campaign has, the greater sort of trickle down or of that type of discussion to to uh, to labor unions will take place. So yeah, I think that there are policy measures. I mean, concretely, the private sector unionization rate is hit 15.5%. It's the lowest
Hmm.
since before World War II, when the RAND formula, the union dues collection, was installed. And so, or was won or partially won, depending on your interpretation of those strikes. But we need to increase that, right? A step towards economic democracy, of course, is within the current parameters of Canadian capitalism. Unions play some role in giving a voice to the workforce in decision making, and play some role, of course, in conditions and wages, etc. But we need federal legislation. We need politicians, provincial level, federal level, that are working to make the conditions for increased unionization, facilitate that, right? And that takes better legislation. That takes politicians who are talking about these things. It takes politicians, certainly it.
Oh, I lost your audio. Can you hear me? Oh shoot.
The legal side. So I don't think it's just a one direction in terms of being top down. Obviously, if you're going to build economic democracy, you're going to build substantially more cooperatives. The cooperative sector is ownership of the economy. You're going to build workplace democracy. All these things, and community ownership requires engagement too, right? It doesn't just require, oh, it's handed off to a few bureaucrats and they're going to run the firm. So this is part of what's necessary. But I think the step one has to be talking about these things. And obviously, the NDP leadership race is a good platform to doing that. And step two is having a politician or political party that's activist oriented, that is trying to bring people in to have these discussions and to figure out exactly what the different steps are towards achieving economic democracy.
I guess the counter argument would be, historically the Bolsheviks, the SPD in Germany, they were their strength had nothing to do with, or little to do with, concessions or help from the state itself. It was kind of all done in spite of the state. Um, and that the really what the step one is, talking, or bringing these issues up and having people understand it, but also building the civil social working class institutions from below so that political campaigns such as yours, such as Bernie's, such as Corbyn's, or people further to the left of them can actually, make a difference. Well, I mean, I would say Bernie and Corbyn, they're really reformists, a little too reformist to make much of a difference anyway. But yeah, the lack of a kind of co class constituted actual working class that's aware of itself and conscious of their place in society, is kind of the thing that may have to be built first for a campaign such as yours to actually be able to, uh, have the legs to, push in any direction in any serious way.
Yeah, and I mean that may be a necessary condition. I think that we don't know at this point in terms of that. Uh, there's a lots of reforms that could be achieved in the short term that would make people's lives better, which may potentially open up the political space for what you're talking about in terms of let's call it more organic working class institutions, uh, building the institutional power and the consciousness to uh, ensure or enforce economic democracy. Uh, but I mean I don't subscribe to a particularly rigid, I guess, sort of view of how social change comes about. I don't know enough. Maybe I'm not well enough read in some of the theory to to speak with too much confidence. I can only speak to the stuff I've been involved with in over 25 years, and I haven't been. It is correct to say I haven't been involved in trying to build grassroots working class organizations. I have worked for a union. I worked for 2.5 years. I worked for the communications energy paper workers, and which became Unifor. But I worked in the research department, and quite honestly, quite removed from the shop floor and the sort of consciousness raising process there. But when I did work for the union, I did try to bring forward ideas of economic democracy. I was able to get like the president of the union into the Ottawa Citizen with an op-ed, saying why do we say we live in democracy in the political sphere, but we don't have democracy in the electoral sphere or in the economic sphere, and so where the ideas get circulated from, and how they circulate around I mean, I don't think there's one way to get ideas circulating, but And so, I don't see, I mean, I am running to be the leader of the NDP, but I don't see this at all as a top-down kind of initiative. I mean, we have nearly 1,000 volunteers, and we have, this campaign is, I can do what I can do what I can do, but it has succeeds or fails based upon, thousands of people's engagement, and those people are at all different levels of social life, some being students, some being working for unions, some being retired, some being working low paid working class jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair questioning of this campaign. But I don't have like a particular answer to what the solution is. But in this context, there is a platform, and we're trying to maximize that platform and take it as far as we can go with pushing forward for anti-capitalist ideas.
I was a member of the NDP for a long time. I've worked on a few campaigns. I worked for the Green Party for a little bit as well. Every time you see the NDP get elected, Mike Harris, or out in BC, or Rachel Notley, what happens? We always get disappointed because they end up kind of capitulating to capitalist politics and the needs of capitalism. So they start feeling the pressure, the same pressures that the conservatives and liberals feel, and then they do what's most convenient or what needs to be done to keep the whole capitalist system working. How are you going to avoid falling into that trap?
I think being in government,
Oh, sorry, I said Mike Harris. I meant
yeah,
Bob Ray.
Bob Ray, I know, I understood that. I think being in government, you you I think there are realities of government that require I don't know, narrowing what's possible. So I don't like. I think when an NDP government like the Bob Rae government comes proposes as part of their platform, says we're going to introduce public auto insurance, and then just capitulates. That has to be absolutely condemned, and people are obviously very, right to criticize Ray on that, and also the broader concessions. Not an expert on all the concessions that Ray gave, but he did really basically go in a neoliberal direction when the economic situation and the sort of the credit agencies and Wall Street started getting critical. Um, so that I would see the step one here is first of all, the step one is to get on the ballot, right? The NDP is not the NDP brass are not excited by me participating in this leadership race.
Well, why don't you talk a little bit about how that process is going right now as well?
Yeah, so we've succeeded they have a nomination. You have to get 500 members representing a bunch of different age, equity, and regional requirements. We've hit over 1,000 members who've signed our form with all the age and equity and requirements fulfilled. It's $100,000 that you have to raise to participate, and the first installment's 25,000. We haven't even publicly began fundraising, and we're already most of the way to that 25. So that won't be a problem. We should have that after our first public fundraising email. Um, but there's also a vetting process, which gives all kinds of power to a small committee to decide if you basically uphold the values of the party. And so that's a form of the brass basically controlling who the members get to decide if they want to vote or not on. So we are trying to build the momentum and the awareness of the campaign to make it more difficult for the brass to basically sabotage democracy. So that's part of it, and yeah, so that's first. The first step is to get onto the NDP leadership race. We think if we feel like we've already had some instances where the other leadership candidates are following what we've been saying
Mm,
on prosecuting Canadians fighting in Gaza, on the some of the housing stuff we put out. So we think we can shape the debate. If we're able to be part of the leadership race, formally part of it, we can shape the debate. If we can win the leadership, then we can, shape the debate federally. So we're many steps away from, forming an Yves Engler government. And I completely agree that you need to do that. You can go into it with whatever great ideas you have or willingness. There are structural realities that are there, and generally the people capitulate to the pressures and the structural realities. Um, so obviously you need to have a fighting force. You need to have a mobilized working class, and you need to have a mobilized NDP. That's, I think, step one from the standpoint of somebody running to be leader of the party, is to try to give more power to the riding association, electoral associations,
mm.
to have the party be engaged with the different social movements taking place, bring the social movements, to tie the social movements more to the party. So all that's huge political struggle in and of itself. The next step of actually forming government is something that's obviously a whole other step. But but yeah, so right now we're in a situation where we're trying to build the momentum, raise the funds, get the signatures to get on the ballot, and to basically make it difficult for the NDP to try to pull any kind of an undemocratic move to block the candidacy.
Okay, I want to get into some more juicy stuff here. You have been in some online battles recently, one of which is with a Facebook friend of mine and former comrade, Ben Marin-Lenski. Lenski. He has thrown some accusations at you, and I was wondering if you'd like to take the opportunity to respond to a couple of things. He's implied, I'd say, that you were trading in red brownism, some alliance between socialists and fascists, and anti-Semitism. Quote, trying to unite the far left and the far right by quoting Tucker Carlson on what it means to be a good nationalist. So maybe you can also give us your position on nationalism as well. Ben accuses you of being a populist social democrat, not a Marxist. I'm not sure he's much of a Marxist either, to be honest. He calls you out for saying terms like Canadian Jewry and Canada's Jewish community must be weakened. How do you respond to these
Well, each
accusations?
one is one by one. I mean, I don't know the red brown stuff. I mean, I've been since I've been engaged politically, I've been I mean clearly on the left. I don't know, I've been to probably 1,000 demonstrations, with dozens being on refugee rights. Many on missing and murdered Indigenous, many on obviously hundreds on Palestine. I mean, like the spectrum of issues that I've been engaged on is not what one would traditionally think of as the right, issues that the right. I mean, I've actually been at multiple demonstrations challenging far right, counter demonstrations here in Montreal, probably at least a half dozen, countering, far right mobilization like La Meute and other groups in. So. Yeah, I mean, I don't, yeah, I just, I don't know what to say to that really, but, uh,
He was implying that, because like there's some people on the right that also are pro Palestine or at least anti-Israel, and that you're kind of courting them. Maybe for
yeah, I
their
mean, there's people who say that using the word Jewish supremacy to refer to what Israel is about, that because there's a far right people who use that term to sort of anti-Semitic ways, that therefore you can't use that term to describe Zionism. But that's what Zionism is. I mean, like Zionism is a system of privileged ethno-racial state. I mean, it's clearly based upon Jewish supremacy. And so you get people who say you can't use that term because there's people on the far right that use that term. But I mean, that's just complete. That's just basically telling the Palestine Solidarity Movement that we can't name things properly. I mean, and that comes from B'Tselem, right? The preeminent Jewish Israeli human rights group. Their prominent report in 2021 was. What's the title? This is apartheid, Jewish supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, or I forget the exact title, but anyway, Jewish supremacy is right in the title.
Hmm.
So, I mean, this is just that's just complete absurdity. Um, yeah, I don't know that now getting into I think maybe something that would be more of the substance of what he's putting forward. Two elements, more of the substance. One on the question of like what drives support for Israel. And I did a book, my book, 2010, Canada and Israel Building Apartheid, and I in that book, I put the emphasis on the geostrategic, the empire, Israel as a tool of Western domination in West Asia. I've obviously, written 11 books on Canadian foreign policy, Canadian imperialism. So I would say maybe as well placed as anyone to talk about Canadian imperialism, be it in Africa and Haiti and other places. Um, I have changed my view from when I published that book in 2010
Mm.
about the locus of power in shaping Canadian foreign policy. I think I downplayed the importance of Jewish Zionist organizations in this country in terms of shaping policy. And
So when
and
you were talking about Canadian Jewry or Canada's Jewish community, you specifically were referring to the Zionist part of it,
I mean
or no?
well yeah, I mean in the article, the one about weakening the Jewish community, I mean you could read the article. It's very clear. It's talking about that demonstration that took place, the Walk for Israel back in June, and it lists all these different Jewish Zionist organizations basically promoting Israel's Holocaust. And the reality is that, and in the article it talks about how there's thousands of Canadian Jews who are critical of Israel. I think you can, I don't know exact words in front of me, but I say that something to the effect that some of the most ardent opponents of Jewish supremacy are Jews, right? Like, yeah, you can. I don't have the paragraph in front of me, but it's written. It's written. I think much better than I've just described it. But so it's really clear. Anyone who's reading that article in a not bad faith way understands what I'm referring to. I mean, I say very clearly there are thousands of Canadian Jews who are critical of Israel, and many of them are some of the most active opponents of Zionism. But the reality is basically all Canadian Jewish organizations support Israel. That's the reality of it. And
Mm.
you got independent Jewish voices, you got Not in Our Name, but of the thousand plus Jewish organizations in Canada outside, there's Neturei Kucha. There's some segments of the Hasidic community that I think is something a little bit different. They're non-Zionists, and some of them are quite active anti-Zionists. But of the outside of that, it's basically unanimous institutionally, right? And that has to be. We don't need to, like, 2 years into a live stream Holocaust, we don't need to be focusing on the sensitivities of Canadian Jewry on that question, right? We have to be absolutely bold and clear in that there is a horrors beyond horrors taking place. And when there's 50,000 people marching in Toronto, organized by the Federation, the Toronto Jewish Federation, and that all these different institutions are backing that. We don't need to be we don't need to be like I mean there's a whole desire to exculpate Jewish community support and responsibility for promoting Israel's crimes. And we don't need to do that, right? Like we have to be really clear. I mean, it's not the crimes are not on behalf of all Canadian Jews, of course not. But when tens of thousands of Canadian Jews take to the streets in Toronto in favor of a live stream Holocaust, we also don't have to try to like pretend that that didn't happen. Oh, like right, and you'll see it where there's lots of people who will say, who'll go out of their way to talk about their Jewish comrades opposing Israel's crimes,
Mhm.
but then won't mention Jewish organizations that are supporting those crimes, right? So I disagree. I don't think Ben, to speak specifically, I don't think Ben um, is serious when he comes with his what I would call very kind of like formulaic descriptions of like how Canadian support for Israel is to be understood. And like I come at this I'm more than happy to debate all these issues, right? I understand Canadian imperialism in Haiti. I've written the book on Canada and Africa. I've written however many articles about Canada, Latin America, other things. I understand the uniqueness of the Israel, right? It is not just coming from pro-Israel Jewish groups. Obviously not. It's like, oh, Canada tied into empire, and Canada's role in conquering Palestine was overwhelmingly because of its ties to the British Empire in 1917. But we can, if we want to have a serious debate about this, not sort of like, oh, I got you, or I have some sort of like, I have the correct analysis of this is just an outgrowth of imperialism and there's nothing more than that and it's all comes from on high and look at it all in an abstract kind of way. No, I'm sorry. It's more complicated than that. And I would just say it's both it's shameful to engage in the smear that he engaged in, and it's intellectually lazy to like if Ben wants to come back and say there's the Jewish community, like it has just this is just all about imperialism. He has to start if he wants to engage in an honest, serious discussion of that. He has to start by telling me what the alternative criteria would be. He has to start by telling me, like, okay, well, how many Jewish organizations in this country are supporting Israel, sending money to Israel, organizing for Israel? How much assets do they have? If he's just going to start by saying, well, you just can't discuss these questions, and if to discuss these questions is ipso facto anti-Semitic, which is kind of implied in a lot of this stuff, right? Then he's not being serious, and unfortunately, I'd say um, the focus on Jewish sensitivities in Canada amidst the horrors taking place is still widespread. It's obviously totally dominant in the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party. It's still heavily influences left perspective. And just one add-on to that, when people talk about like anti-Semitism on the left, there's more anti-Palestinianism.
Mm.
And one example of that is find people 22 or 2 years into a Holocaust designed to cleanse Gaza of non-Jews. Um, 2 years into it, and how many people who have used the term Jewish supremacy versus using the term anti-Semitism? And I find basically everyone on the left. has used the term anti-Semitism more times than they used the word Jewish supremacy, and that's amidst a genocide on behalf of, with the aim of, and Smoldrich and Ben Gvir are not, they don't hide this. The point is to drive all non-Jews out of Gaza. The point of what they're doing is to advance Jewish supremacy. That is from Israeli government officials. That is, they're not hiding that. And yet you'll find almost across the board on the Canadian left that they're people have referred to anti-Semitism more times than they referred to Jewish supremacy. To me, that's very telling. I mean, Ben, to be fair to Ben, he is somebody who does refer to Zionism as Jewish supremacy. To be fair to him, but others, for the most part, that's not the case.
Do you think there is a sense in which the left's focus and fixation on Israel Gaza, as bad as it is, as genocidal as it is, also serves in a way as a means to distract from the real task at hand, which is building the grassroots organizing and working class institutions that have been basically decimated since a century ago, more or less. I mean, it's most obviously in the United States where there's only two parties, and the left funnels itself into the Democrats in one way or another. Even in their anti-Israel or their pro-Palestine activism, um, is there a way that can be said also for, I mean, it's a big focus of your campaign. You're an activist. You're out on the streets. You're talking about it a lot. Does it make sense to use that as a organizing tool around this issue in particular?
Well, I mean, at a macro level, no. I mean, I come from the complete opposite direction. On the macro level, I mean, I have a book called Left Right Marching to the Beat of Imperial Canada, where it shows the history of the left, uh, NDP, CCF, unions, and even lots of the sort of left intelligentsia or intellectuals supporting Canadian imperialism. So I definitely I would say it's the other way around, where the
Mm,
history of Canada is the worst crimes that were engaged in are internationally, right? That is the worst part of the federal government's policies is internationally. I mean, just to take a concrete example of something around racism. Well, the core group in Haiti, right? In Haiti, Canada's part with the U.S., France, and a couple other countries, part of the core group of ambassadors that have basically been running Haiti since the 2004 coup. It was created. It's basically a bunch of white guys telling this overwhelmingly black country that was born in the greatest uprising against racial slavery, telling them what to do. And the NDP actually formally supports that. You have basically no one on the Canadian left who ever even outside the Haitian community, ever even refers to the core group. Um, there's no, as far as I can tell, there's no clearer example of anti-black racism in Canadian political life than Canada's membership in the core group, and yet no one talks about it. It's just not even known among the left or about whatever. So that's just an example of how foreign policy is in fact the area where the government gets away with the biggest criminal, anti-human positions. So now Palestine is a little bit unique, or what we've seen over the past 2 years is unique. This is the greatest uprising against Canada's complicity in international crimes in the history. There is no other example, part of South Africa, Vietnam War, any other example where there's been more protest about Canada's role in a international horror show. Um, so I see that entirely from a positive perspective. Obviously, I would want more of that uprising, more of that protest. And I would say, in fact, the NDP and unions have done a poor job, and left organizations more generally, like this, smaller, radical leftist organizations, they've done a poor job of of um, of I don't want to how you frame it, but capturing that energy of mobilizing that energy, and it's often youthful, and it's often actually people of color. It's predominantly Arab, and or disproportionately Arab, and uh, and so I think that I mean certainly with the NDP, the NDP should have been. I mean the fact that they've never participated. Jagmeet Singh didn't participate in one demonstration, right? All through these horrors, not one single protest, and that probably holds for most leaders of presidents of unions, and that probably even holds for most presidents of locals of unions. I'd guess, and not maybe not, but lots of presidents of locals unions probably have participated, but probably most haven't. And so. Yeah, I don't think that now you can go and say, well, the empire and Canadian complicity in imperialism is an outgrowth of its relationship to the U.S. empire and Canadian capital's global profit making exercises. Sure, and I agree with that at a general level. But concretely, I mean, something is happening, and there's a reaction to that thing happening, and mobilizing on that is a good thing. So no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I would say more the criticism from the other side, and that's actually one of the reasons I'm even running for the NDP leadership is that. Um, is that the I think there's a lot of discontent out there, motivated from from the genocide. There's a lot of people who aren't don't I don't know, so maybe haven't had much exposure to the left or anti-capitalist ideas. And but are just like look at the situation or just completely appalled what's happening in Gaza and are appalled that our politicians are supporting that. And so there's a way to by because I have profile on the Palestine question, there's a way to engage to use that kind of discontent and whatever to broaden people's analysis and to certainly broaden in terms of criticism came foreign policy and I would go a step further in criticism of capitalism and the other colonial oppressive structures. Yeah, I would say no, and if anything, it's the other way around.
Okay. We didn't get much of a chance to talk about your domestic policy. Why don't you give us why don't you give us a rundown of what does your anti-capitalism look like, and how are you going to be able to mobilize this energy into moving us towards socialism with the policies you're talking about?
Well, I mean, the first some of the major announcements we made, they're not. I mean, they challenge elements of capital, but they're ultimately fairly, they're just reformist. So, for instance, we just announced, free education, abolishing the all outstanding student debt.
Right.
Something that exists in, I don't know exact number, but 20 countries, and it's not even in Quebec, you have the CEGEP system that goes to first year university, and you can use it to go all the way, and it's essentially free, and so there's nothing particularly uh, I mean, it's outside of the bounds of the current discussion in Canada, but it's nothing particularly
Radical.
radical. The other big point on this front that we've announced, and there is a full policy. There's a policy committee of like 40 people that drafted very extensive policy, and we haven't released it yet. And it's going to come out, and it flushes out, the expropriations and how do you actually get rid of billionaires, and by expropriating different industries. But the other major policy that is I think challenges capital certainly more than free education does, but is still actually in some ways just a return to 30 years ago is the proposal around the real estate investment trusts, and these are basically um, they get special tax provisions to pay basically less tax, where wealth holders pool their wealth and engage in property purchases. And so there's but more than 200,000 units of housing that are controlled by real estate investment trusts. And our proposal is to declare a national housing emergency and to turn those REITs into co-op housing. And I mean, this would elicit a major backlash, of course, from across the capitalist class, but specifically the real estate, the financial kind of real estate world. Uh,
Yes.
and but it's actually, I mean, these didn't exist until the mid 1990s, right? So it's not like it's sort of returning to a slightly more social democratic-y time. It's but in the here and now, I think all the data on these what happens when the REITs take over buildings, they evict people at like much higher rates, they drive up the rents, and that's even from your sort of standard corporate landlords, right? So it's the most egregious, and we've incentivized through the tax code these property developers who just drive up rents and evict more people. So I think that's a proposal that, considering the state of the number of unhoused people across the country living in just abject misery, and then millions more who are in precarious situation in terms of housing. That's a proposal that I think has a lot of traction, and if we can really build some energy behind it, it would be quite impactful in the whole discussion about housing in this country. The other thing we're talking about is shutting down the tar sands. That, of course, is that elicits a major backlash from the oil sector and the banks that have generally lots of investment in the pipeline companies and the like. But from the standpoint of the climate crisis, and from the standpoint of reducing Canada's outsized contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, and more generally, resource and ecological destruction. That it has to happen, and it has to happen. Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? I think that's certainly pushing it, but we need to at least be talking about that. So. Capitalism can certainly continue on without the tar sands being extracted. Capitalism can certainly continue on with education, university being free. Capitalism can certainly continue on with returning to the time when the government actually invested a bit in public housing. But in the here and now, that definitely challenges. It certainly challenges neoliberal thinking, and it challenges important segments of capital.
All right. Thanks for chatting with me today, Yves.
Thanks for having me.
If, dear viewer, you'd like to get involved in Yves Engler's campaign for the NDP leadership, head to eveforndpleader.ca. I'll link it in the description.